Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share their real life experiences and the tools they developed to move forward and live their best lives. I'm Jennie Taylor.
I'm Michelle Scharf, and today we have a special guest on our show. Ryan Craner is the founder of Strategic Planning Group. Over 30 years ago, he helped or I guess for the past 30 years, he's helped consumers avoid piecemeal planning and simply buying products, and instead created an all-inclusive written strategic plan for their lives. A strategic plan is to your financial life what a blueprint is to building a home. This custom approach, which began as a simple idea, has grown Strategic Planning Group into a trusted and established firm, taking the client advocate and consumer protection approach. Ryan has always viewed every client as a long-term and very important relationship. I love the analogy of building a blueprint, just like building a blueprint for a home. My husband was a contractor. I've been involved in the construction companies for the past 30 plus years of my life. And you have to start with the foundation and then the framing, and there's a process, and you can't jump ahead and just do part of it. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good, solid finish. Laying that foundation is probably the most important thing to starting to build a great home. Right. So, what's interesting, Ryan, is I have had a lot of women after John was diagnosed with cancer come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing this? And what's the one thing that you would say to me, one piece of advice?" Because really a lot of women, 40s, 50s, even some of them have been younger in their 30s that are married, they're shocked, right? Either they don't know somebody that this has happened to, or they're just curious, how do you manage this? And one of the things that I've told them is, one of the most important things is start having conversations today. Conversations about what if something happens to you? What are those funeral plans going to be? But most importantly, there's some specific things that need to happen and need to be in place. Otherwise, financially, you're going to find yourself in a lot of problems. And luckily, I had the opportunity and the time. I had 2 years to figure these things out and get our financial lives in place. It was not done before. Had my husband died in a car accident, I would have been in a much different, complicated situation financially. I had time to put together a will and make sure that I had an attorney and that I sought out financial help. And so tell us, what are those pieces that we need?
Well, I like how you pointed out the idea of a blueprint. If you could imagine building a home today and the footings and foundation, people show up to dig the foundation and ask for the blueprint, and you say, well, I don't have one. Just do whatever you did for the last person. What do you think looks good on the lot? And you did that with each stage of construction. You may not want to live in the house if you ever got it done.
Yeah.
And as crazy as that sounds, unfortunately, that's what most Americans do with regard to retirement planning and financial planning and legal and tax planning. This is how we approach it. It's what we call piecemeal planning. Most Americans use piecemeal planning. It's not really a method. It's just what happens in the absence of a written blueprint or plan.
Well, part of this podcast is about talking not only about resiliency, but loss, grief, the unplanned things that happen in life. We as Americans, and to have that discussion about the things we don't talk about, like grief and sadness and loss. But one of the things we don't talk about is finances. We don't talk to each other. We don't talk to our kids about it. We don't know what our parents' planning is. So why is that? Do you have some insight as to?
Well, some of it, we're just now learning that K through 12 education is now going to implement personal finance as one of the core subjects that they teach on. We had kids that knew how to do algebra or calculus, but didn't know anything about how to balance a checkbook or buy an auto insurance policy or how to price out, everyday things in the financial world. So I think there is a deficit to some degree of a little bit of acumen and a little bit of know-how on, well, you need to make sure of these things, even if you're small, young, low income at first and just getting started. There are certain things that you need to be paying attention to. And human nature is, if it gets too complex, we're not going to deal with it. So we deal with human nature in this process all the time. And you know,
do you think that people just see it like there's so much that I don't know, and maybe I'm embarrassed. Maybe I'm embarrassed to go talk about someone that I don't know these things.
That's an absolute real thing. That's human nature, and it's you might call it pride. It's just normal. People don't want to admit that they may be deficient in one way or another. So to me, you know, it comes down, if you see the things I write over the years, you'll hear me talking about piecemeal planning, one, but also meaning, a lack of meaning. And I've said it over and over again. Most people don't know what a 401k is or what it really means and why we even call it a 401k. Everybody knows the word 401k because almost everybody's participated in one or had the opportunity to participate at some point. But 401k, what does it mean? There's a meaningless name there, and that's because it's from the Internal Revenue Code, the most boring document on the planet. It means nothing. They should have named it the very important, vital dream retirement account that you must put money in every year in order to retire account, or K account.
Yeah.
So this lack of meaning persists through all of this. People hear about Roth IRAs, but they don't know what they are. Roth IRAs are, a Roth IRA is an amazing tax-free IRA. Every dollar of profit you ever earn in a Roth IRA will never get taxed to you or your beneficiaries. That's amazing. But people don't know what that's, why it's, they don't know what that means because it's called Roth IRA. So why in the world did we call the amazing tax-free IRA a Roth IRA? Well, unfortunately, it's because we named it after the senator that put it through Congress, okay? And it has it's just another element of the meaning or lack of meaning that persists. And that's why people are usually unprepared. They don't know, so they don't do. And so we don't need to create a massive amount of education. We just need to create a little bit of meaning for people, even people that are younger or maybe, you know, just getting started. You've got to cover some basics. Make sure you have the proper insurance, risk management, proper life insurance, health insurance, disability insurance, and those kind of things in place. Make sure, even though you can't afford very much, you may be paying off student loans, just getting started, but participate in retirement accounts, even at a small number, and start early.
Right. Even if you're in your 20s, let's say, and you started with like $20 a month, I mean, that adds up.
It matters, and the habit matters.
Right, the habit matters. And, you know, when you're 25, if you move that up to $100 a month, or if you're 30 and now you're doing $500 a month. But those numbers, while small in numbers, but consistent in your 60s, 70s, creates a whole different lifestyle of retirement. Is that correct?
Right. And so we have two basic stories. If you look into people's lives that we work with at Strategic Planning Group, we have two stories. People that did start fairly early at young ages in investing and saving for retirement, even though it was really small at first. These people have a lot of options in their 40s and 50s that they could come to shove, retire at early ages. And most of them only work because they like what they do, because they don't have to from a financial standpoint. And then we have another profile in our office, and those are people that we might consider more normal or more commonplace, where they didn't think much about this early on. They were under pressure of having kids and dealing with finances, and they just didn't put very much away, and they come in and see us in their late 40s or even late 50s, and they want to retire sometime in their 60s. And believe it or not, we get them there. But the amount of money they have to shovel in is significantly different.
And they're having to really, they're having to live a different lifestyle during that section of life to make up the difference.
They have to play catch up.
Right.
And so the message that I would have is this: start early. It's so much easier and so much less of a burden on your cash flow and your budget. However, the other part of the message is if you find yourself in your 40s or 50s and you don't feel you're prepared, get in to a financial advisor and make sure you get started, because it can be done. We see success all the time where people started and then the last 5 to 10 years of their working years actually got where they need to be for retirement.
You know, Ryan, we're going to talk all over each other. I'm going to jump in really quick for those of you who are listening that are like, I don't have billions of dollars, or what am I going to do if I don't have $500 extra a month to put in? And I'm going to admit, if I were not a widow, if my husband had not died, and then we had life insurance and tax implications and benefits and my children and all of these snowball things that came after his unexpected death, I myself would not have a financial planner. And I'll tell you why, because I think a lot of people might identify. I don't have lots and lots of dollars. And so if I don't have lots and lots of dollars, I don't think I need to worry about how to manage my wealth, because I don't have any wealth. I did have lots and lots of kids. I still do. You know, my husband and I, he was the only breadwinner in our home. He made enough money that we paid the bills and we could pay piano lessons and things. But it wasn't like we were just sitting around rolling in extra dollars each month. Oh, how should we spend this? I need an advisor to tell me the best stock to buy, because you know I'm paying for groceries and diapers. And I think it's important to look at that and see, no matter, even my husband and I were careful with money. We're both thrifty by nature. We talked about money all of the time. We made sure we spent less than we made. We never talked to a professional advisor because we did not understand that whether you're wealthy or not, it doesn't hurt to talk to a professional financial advisor. And whether you want to retire in huge luxury or not, or whether you work for a company that gives you a pension or not, or whether you're self-employed. I mean, I could list 100 whether or nots. My message to you today is you need to talk to someone now, whether you're 22 or 62 or somewhere in the middle. Like Ryan said, it's not too late, and today's better than tomorrow. But, you know, again, I was kind of thrust into this whirlwind of paperwork and legal documents, and what if I die next, and then my kids are orphans. And so there was a lot of emotional push into making financial decisions and hoping that I can, you know, even pay the bills, because now I'm a widow and I'm a stay-at-home mom. So there was all that emotion behind my first conversation with a financial planner that, man, I think, what if my husband and I in our 20s, we got married at 25, what if we'd sat down with someone and said, hey, what do you think? We know, we might be able to eke out $5 or $10, and that really might be all we can eke out. Or tell me how $5 or $10 a paycheck today turns into $1 million over time. Because I'll tell you, the math I learned in junior high doesn't add up that way, right? I don't know that.
Absolutely.
I don't think that. Like you said, the meaning, you know, my generation's still from the generation where our grandparents had big pension plans. Like my grandfather was an executive for Intermountain Healthcare. He retired, and he's just lived off of that forever.
Right.
Well, that doesn't exist anymore. Very seldom are the companies or businesses that say, come work for us for 30 years and then we'll retire you. Very seldom are people working for the same company for 30 years.
So a little different story for John and I. John was always self-employed. Now, we actually did speak to a financial planner who got us into some products, and unfortunately those products didn't gain or increase in the way that we were promised or they were projected to. And then John convinced me to go ahead and sell those products so he could buy his race cars and start racing. So this is the thing. We started talking to somebody, but they put us in products that were not what we needed to be in and were not effective. So I think that is something that we really need to talk about. It's like, don't just talk to somebody. Who are the people that we should talk to?
And
then
how do you
what are those first things that we need to be talking about? Tell us about your blueprint, how you brought it all together. Because there is, and we'll get down to this in a minute. I want you to address that, who we should be talking to first. But your blueprint is very comprehensive. It talks about the legal, the attorney, the will trust portion, the financial advising portion, which is where you're going to be invested in, how you're going to grow your money, and what your long-term plan is, your perfect calendar, what you want that life to look like, which we all know is not perfect. Mm-hmm. And then there's that tax piece as well. So kind of take us with who we should be talking to, and then bring us into...
Let's do that. Let's talk about that for a minute. First, to Jenny's point, most people do what you're talking about, Jenny, is they don't think they have enough money to talk to anybody, and so it just kind of, hey, I've paid the bills, I put food on the table, I've done my job, that's all I can do right now. I don't have extra money sitting around, so I don't need an advisor. And actually, the right kind of advisor is very helpful in that process, because there are things that you can pay attention to and have complete as far as it goes for financial preparedness. The more prepared you are, of course, the more resilient you're going to be through any crisis. But most Americans practice what we call crisis management when it comes to financial planning and investment, retirement, and these kind of things. They wait until an event. They lose their job, they're disabled, there's been a death in the family, and then they arrange the crisis around that event.
I'm like raising my hand over here, Ryan. Yeah, that's me. Yep, crisis management rather than just planning ahead.
Crisis
Nailed it right on the head.
Rather than preparedness, right?
Right.
And so that's what...
and that's where I was too, before I found my financial advisor. And so, but the good news is that I found such a great financial advisor that I'm doing the things to be prepared in the future for not only, I'm no longer married, but I want to make sure that my assets go to my children.
Right.
I want to make sure that taxes or probate is avoided.
Correct.
Those kind of things. And so go ahead. Keep
so there's,
you know what? Actually, before we go on, because we're going to need to take a break to go to our sponsors, let's take a break for just a minute. And when we come back, we will address who and where we should be talking to and what are the things that we need to have covered.
Right.
So thank you for joining us, Ryan, and we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. And we're back with Ryan Craner with Strategic Planning Group, located in Bountiful. He is sharing with us kind of his wisdom and insights to why people don't do the financial planning that we all should be doing, and how Americans kind of operate in that crisis management zone. And now he's going to tell us how to find that financial person to give us good, solid advice, understand how they get paid, who it is we should be talking to, and then cover those items that we need to discuss with this person.
Right. So the human nature part of that, I've talked about, the lack of meaning and how to actually connect meaning. People do their planning better, and they're more excited to prepare for retirement and invest and so on and so forth when they know why, the why behind it and the meaning. So we covered that. There's 4 basic areas that even a young couple or younger people or people that don't have, extra money and things like that should cover. And that is have the right amounts of life insurance and disability insurance and make sure you're covered medically in place the best you can. Cover investment and retirement, even though you may be students or paying off student loans or just don't have extra income, start small. Even $20 a month creates a habit, and it starts the process, and it pays off really well later in life. Pay attention to tax reduction and tax opportunities, and then, of course, cover the legal parts. There's 4 quadrants: insurance, investment, tax, and legal. And make sure these things are in place. Even the poorest person can have a will, okay? Even the most financially constrained people can have and pay attention to retirement and tax at a small level at first. So that's the first thing I would say. As far as who to talk to, you probably have noticed that there is no shortage of people that want to talk to you about investing and insurance and so on and so forth. And where I would start is avoid salespeople. Some of the best people I know are on commission, okay? They're good people, usually honest people, and that's just the way they earn a living. But when it comes to getting accurate, ongoing, competent, qualified advice, I would suggest that you arrange it so that they work for you rather than an institution for commission. And there are plenty of great advisors out there that operate in that space. You'll hear the word fiduciary thrown around in that conversation, and that's a good place to start. It's not an end-all, be-all, because Fiduciary licensed people can also sell commission products out the other side of their business. So we have to be a little cautious there. You're still going to have to make an evaluation. But some of the basics are avoid anybody in your living room. Well, what do I mean by that?
Well, the guy who's knocking on your door or setting up the appointment to come and sit down and visit with you.
Right. So the first thing I will say is expertise will not come to your living room. When was the last time a neurosurgeon or an ND came to your living room? When was the last time any level of real expertise came to your living room? So it's not everybody, but it's a good rule of thumb. If they're in your living room, they're usually a salesperson.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make them bad. It's just something that we should try to avoid. Make sure you're dealing with competent, qualified, unbiased advisors that work for you and are willing to do planning for you in that regard. So from there, it goes back. I always like to quote the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. It creates a principle of, Jennie mentioned it early on, the principle of living on less than you make. And so the richest man, one of the biggest takeaways from The Richest Man in Babylon is learning how to live on 90% of your income. And in our case, we'd say a little further, learning to live on 80% of your income. And that principle, I have a quote from the book I think is instructive here. And it says, you cannot arrive at the fullest measure of success until you crush the spirit of procrastination within you. And that is so instructive, because talk to anybody at any age and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to get going on the retirement thing next year after we get the boat paid off, or after I get this loan paid off, or this event or that event.
Or after I have a baby, or
right.
After my husband's promotion.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So the spirit of procrastination lives and is alive in all of us. And if we can figure out how to checkmate some of that procrastination, we can arrive at huge successes for people in this regard.
I'm going to throw a quick plug for the book, Richest Man in Babylon. It's on Amazon for $5.
Yeah.
$5, people. Like, read it. I like a couple things what you've mentioned, Ryan, about the habit. It's not so much let me give you lots and lots of dollars. It's help me learn how to put aside a couple of dollars. Help me develop that habit, that mindset that saving a little now will, really pay off later. You know, I told you my story, how we paid the bills and we saved a little, but we never really had that conversation on a deeper level. But I have a college roommate who, as a college student, had stocks. She had money invested. I'm like, you are the weirdest person I've ever met. Well, guess what? We're now entering our 40s, and like you said, it gives her, and I'm not saying she's now the richest woman in Babylon, but that habit, that awareness, her participation in some of those opportunities from her 18, 19, 20s, now these 2 decades later, look how well that's positioning her to be able to make decisions or be charitable to other people or not stress over every dollar. One thing we talk about a lot on this podcast is the fact that life does not go perfectly as planned, like for anybody. That's not just true for widows. That is just true. And so I have found that while money can't solve all of our problems, and I'm not proposing that it does, I feel like the lack of money or stress over money or worry about money exaggerates every problem. So, again, back to my situation, I lost my husband. We've got these 7 kids. We're both 39. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Well, so we're looking at life insurance. We're looking at benefits. We're looking at, am I going to be able to stay home? Now, my husband was killed in action, which brings in some military benefits. But back up 30 years. My mom was a widow when I was 10. She had 4 little kids. My dad wasn't military. They had a very small life insurance policy. She had 4 kids and a high school diploma. Look how hard that next 3 decades became for her. And I'm incredibly aware of that now in my position, kind of, echoing hers in a way. I never thought that would happen to me. People listening never thought it would happen to them. And the fact that you can help us have some conversations, again, having money doesn't solve every problem, but being aware of money, being wise with money, being familiar with how to save and invest can help take some of the edge off of a death of a loved one, can help take the edge off of a divorce or a cancer diagnosis or really expensive prescriptions. Life costs money, and somehow crises, like you said, this crisis management, most crises I've ever encountered are very expensive. And so help us know, I love what you're saying, that if we can build these building blocks, it's not just because we want to grow up and be super rich and wealthy. That doesn't appeal to everyone, though I don't know a lot of people that want to grow up and be poor. But I think we're also talking about, particularly in the middle of this pandemic, on this podcast that focuses on trials and resilience, let's talk about financial stability, financial security, and how that will then put me in a position to maybe not be in such a crisis next time life throws me a crisis.
Right. That's a great point. It's planning and preparedness versus crisis management. And, this is hard, especially when, we're talking about younger people or where we're, pushed right up against our income and budgets. It doesn't feel like you're a candidate for planning and preparation when, in fact, everybody is. And there are little things that every person and every couple, every individual can do to walk down that road of preparedness and planning rather than happenstance, piecemeal, or crisis management. And so, there's a Coveyism, always begin any journey with your destination in mind. There's a tremendous amount of comfort that I watch people, it's a human nature thing, I watch people go through when you don't have any vision or you don't have any idea of what a destination looks like. And that's where we talk about our perfect calendar, where people describe for us their perfect lifestyle. And it may be some elements of that are a fantasy, but it creates a dynamic where they can actually see a place they want to be. Now they have a destination in mind. They have a lot more questions at that point. How do I get there? What do I have to do to get there? It's creating motivation, and that's what it does. You're more motivated to pay attention, do the things, make the sacrifices, and have conversations and get advice. Yeah. So, unfortunately, the financial planning, financial advice, investment industry is full of salespeople. A lot of good people, but there are salespeople everywhere, and you've got to identify an advisor that works for you. Fortunately, there are plenty. Just do a little shopping. Have an eye of discernment for the things that I've talked about. And whenever possible, make sure they work for you and are paid by you. And it's not terribly expensive. It really is achievable for anybody. So, here's some do's and don'ts. Don't get tied up into illiquid investment products where your money's tied up for 5, 10, 15 years and sometimes even longer. Usually these are insurance industry type products, annuities and investment grade life insurance policies and these things. They're real exciting to talk about on paper, but practically they usually don't work out for people. If you need life insurance, buy it by the pound, cheaply. Use term insurance. Don't buy these expensive cash value insurance. And again, stay away from the salespeople on that.
And probably stay away from anything that sounds too good to be true, right? I mean, I think that's one piece of advice in most of our lives, but where there are a lot of people who might want to tell you, I know, for example, as a widow, with people knowing I have life insurance, people knowing I'm a military widow, people knowing we had charitable contributions made to our family with these 7 little kids I have. I also had lots of people telling me they wanted to help me know what to do with my money. And again, you're in that bubble of grief. You're in that crisis. That is not the right time to say, ooh, I'm going to try to get rich quick, or that sounds so good, I'm going to hurry and turn around. I sat down with a financial advisor who even showed me the graphs and the charts on his computer and was positive what that might look like. And I will tell you, I went with trust your gut on it and walked straight out of that office and just thought that is not, and it wasn't because I had
Jennie,
the technical know-how.
I had the same experience.
Everybody wants to tell you what to do with your money. That's different from having someone advise you to what you're comfortable doing, and you really have to get a feel for the person you're working with.
So John told me, he sent me off and he said, look, you're going to have to take over the finances, so you need to go do this. And so during cancer treatments and insurance company arguing and having to work full time, I was also interviewing a host of people to figure out how to manage my wealth, or what would be left of my wealth. And it was quite a journey. I met a lot of people that had maybe a lot of good intentions. Some of them were maybe new into the financial industry. And I also met with some people that had been in the industry very, very long time, but they were mostly insurance. Like they had a lot of products to put my my money into. And so one of the things that I would ask these people is, how do you get paid? And I had forgot to ask that one guy. And when I met with him, he had me come to his suite. He had an attorney present, and I really liked that. And they looked at what I had written the will. I had actually gone online and done some research, and I had written a very basic will. And the attorney looked it over, and he said, "You did a fantastic job on this will." He goes, "You don't need to do anything else for your situation right now." He's like, "This will absolutely cover you and do what you need it to do." That was fantastic. It was great that he was there. But I'd forgotten when I left to ask that person how he got paid. And I called him back and I asked him, and he said, "Well, you don't really have to worry about it."
Right.
Well, I do, actually. And not only, look, we all deserve to be paid, and I expect that you're going to get paid for doing the job that I need you to do. I just want to know how that is going to happen.
So what's the right answer? What do I, if I'm interviewing someone, I'm looking for a financial advisor, a professional to help me, and I say, "Hey, how do you get paid?" What in your professional opinion, Ryan, what do I want that answer to be?
Well,
when they say, "Oh, just don't worry about it." I mean, obviously he's going to get paid by a paycheck every month, but what am I really asking when I'm asking that question?
That's a good point. And there's little differences everywhere, and there's no one sum of money or anything like that that's accurate. But the "don't worry about it" is a bad sign. That's a sign of a commission salesperson.
Deflecting the question maybe is a red flag.
Right.
Not a good sign. So there should be written disclosure up front.
Right. And so I continued to press. And what I found out is, well, I'm going to get some from this thing that we talked about. I'm going to get some from this thing that we talked about. And then I'm like, well, how much is that? And how does that work? And so he was either unwilling or just did not give me the information. And that was the moment that I did that gut check.
Right, it's the gut check.
And I left.
If you can't explain it to me in a way that makes sense to me, I can't trust you with my money, whether it's $20 or a lot more.
Right. And so for me, that was the moment that I'm like, this isn't going to work. And it just so happened that somebody told me, "Well, why aren't you using this person?" And I said, "Well, because I didn't know that that's what they did for a living."
Oh, can I?
And then I went and interviewed that person as well.
And felt more comfortable. Mm-hmm. Can I? Let's sideline for a second what you just mentioned about insurance, and you said that about life insurance. Let's talk about life insurance, because again, I feel like I am such a poster child for this conversation. I haven't worked outside of my home since my first daughter was born almost 16 years ago. I was a school teacher when I did teach, so like you talk about my Social Security contributions, they probably are bigger from when I was a waitress in college than those couple years I taught public school. I don't have this bubble of my own money to worry about, but I also am not bringing in a monthly income. So when my husband and I would talk about life insurance, we of course would think we need life insurance on him, because if something ever happened to him, which of course we didn't think really would, then I would need money to be able to raise these children and such. But I'll admit we had a life insurance policy on him through the military, because you could for $11 a month or whatever. And that's kind of as far as the conversation went until we had our third baby. And then we realized I should probably have some life insurance on me, because even though I don't bring money in every month, I'm the chauffeur, I'm the cook, I'm the cleaner, I'm the caregiver, I'm the appointment runner, I'm a lot of tasks that, ironically, the only real conversations my husband and I ever had in depth about what if something happened to me. And so it wouldn't be my paycheck he'd need to replace, but it would be the different things he would then need help either hiring out or divvying out or outsourcing. And then let's talk about, how do you calculate how much insurance you should have, a life insurance policy, particularly while you're in those younger years raising children. Because I'm going to throw this out to every listener right now. No matter how much life insurance you have, you need more. I'm just going to throw that out there. And especially if you have young kids at home, It costs more than you think. It goes more quickly than you think. And even though, back to my parents, my mom and dad had $160,000 of life insurance. Now, in the 80s, that felt like $5 billion on paper. You know how long that lasts when you're trying to raise 4 kids with no other income? So can you help us look at life insurance on working spouse, non-working spouse, raising children? How do you calculate, like you said, buy it by the pound? Okay, I feel like I need a lot of pounds of life insurance. How do I know what's the right amount of life insurance?
Right.
And to what age do then maybe I change that
Correct.
Conversation? Once my kids are grown, maybe I don't need as large of a policy because little people aren't little anymore.
Right.
Help us with that.
So it's an answer that most people don't know. It's a question that most people don't know the answer to. And there are a lot of salespeople out there that are going to tell you a lot of different answers to that question. Here's some rules of thumb. Anywhere between 8 and 10 times your annual income.
Okay, say that again. 8 and 10 times my total annual income. Right. I'm going to tell you right now, as a 30-year-old something, which is where I was when my husband died, that sounds like so much money. That's not excessive. That is not excessive.
It's not excessive, and it doesn't have to be expensive. And so use this example. If we have a family, a couple that are earning $100,000 a year, there should be $1 million policy on the income earners. I think $1 million worth of life insurance, that's got to be expensive.
That just sounds like you're going to go buy the Taj Mahal if your spouse dies and you're incentivizing something awful. I mean, sounds like that.
For people in their 30s and 40s, $1 million policy, as long as certain health and medical elements are in place, $1 million policy is $40, $50 a month. It is not expensive. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be expensive, especially when we're talking about term life insurance policies, and there's all different flavors. But that's the general gist of it, or the rule of thumb is 8 to 10 times your income. So
what if I'm not the breadwinner? Again, if I died, my husband in theory would still be going to work, but how does he still go to work if all the kids are home and I'm not there? How do you calculate maybe either a smaller breadwinner of the two if there's a 2-income home, or if you have a stay-at-home parent, how do you figure what type of life insurance policy was appropriate for that person? It's
a different calculation. So for the income earner in the family, or earners in the family, you kind of treat it like, this is a machine that spits out $50,000 a year, or a machine that spits out $100,000 per year. If you had a machine like that in your basement, you would probably...
That'd be a great machine. Yeah, can I get one?
You would probably insure it against damage or breakage, right? We'd have that thing insured. And the same with a person that earns an income. We're insuring that income to the family, making sure that income continues to the family. And Jennie, you make a great point. Sometimes people ignore where we have a homemaker or somebody that isn't generating income, but they're taking care of everything else. That is also a deficit to the family. If you were to have died, Brent would have had all those expenses and maybe not enough income to pay it all. It would have been a huge burden and created problems. So it's not necessarily a multiple of income in that case. It's like, okay, how much do I need to augment my income? And for you, it's usually, in that example, it might be $250,000 to $500,000 that would have been the appropriate amount.
Which still sounds like a really, really large amount of money. And we had a $250,000 policy on me, thinking groceries, child care alone, I probably should have tripled that budget just with the number of kids we have. But I appreciate you helping to put some numbers to that, knowing that people can obviously talk to their own insurance person and get to where they're comfortable. But I'm just going to throw it out there again. You need more in life insurance than you think you do, and hopefully you will never, ever, ever, ever use it. I wish my life insurance money were all wasted. I would be very happy if I had wasted every dollar of life insurance I ever spent from my husband's Army policy. And I'm grateful we paid it every month.
Right.
Amen.
That's accurate on the insurance. I like, Jennie, what you said a moment ago, too good to be true. There's a lot of too good to be true out there in the investment world, the financial advice and financial planning world. There are 6 different Ponzi schemes occurring right now along the Wasatch Front. And I'm not going to name names or organizations, but they're occurring and they're collecting money right now. On some of these, the regulators know about them, and they're doing everything they can to get it fixed and shut down and prosecuted, but it takes regulators a long time. In the meantime, they're out there talking to people, everyday people in our community, about these can't-lose investments and these golden opportunities that are fraudulent. Unfortunately, it happens everywhere. So follow that too good to be true. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Adage is really applicable. And so there's another area of discernment, not just deciding who's advising you, but being careful with these kind of options. And so here's something I learned and have adhered to a long time ago. Somebody said to me, always get a second opinion on anything expensive or painful. And so we do that in our medical. Sometimes we get a second opinion from another doctor and another practitioner and just verify that we're on the right track. Anything you're investing money in or getting started, you should always get a second opinion. Now, we have a second opinion service. We call it our SOS. And there are lots of ways to go about that. But you can enter, and give us the information, and we will give you a unbiased, no strings attached, no cost second opinion on anything sizable that you're planning to invest or any kind of proposal or advice you're getting. So that kind of just goes with the shopping around for financial advice. Look out for too good to be true. And always get a second opinion on anything expensive, important, or financial.
Can we talk for a quick second about education plans? A lot of people listening might be where they have children at home who someday hope to go to college, who someday will have to pay the ridiculously rising tuition rates. I know Utah and I imagine most states have different rules for investing in a college fund that I would imagine most people like me are probably more familiar with how to invest in my child's education fund than I am how to invest in my own retirement. Like, I'll just be honest. Can we talk about that for a second?
We can. And this is a question I get all the time. This is really apt that you bring this up because we see it. So I could introduce you to several families that I've met over the years where they don't have any retirement. They're literally going to be scrimping by in retirement, but all their kids have college degrees. And so I hope they have the basement apartment ready for their parents.
So they've thrown all their money into saving to make sure their child gets to school, but they haven't looked at the other side of their own long-term plan.
Correct. And so here's an analogy. Every time you get on an airplane, you hear this. Should there be a lack of oxygen in the cabin, secure your mask and then help others. So I would say that to clients or investors, make sure your security, your retirement is secured first, and then you set about setting up college or mission funds and things like that. And you can do both. We can actually walk and chew gum also. So we can accomplish both of those. But the primary order, unless you're fond of the idea of living with your kids in your retirement years, secure your retirement and your personal finance first, and then you start college and mission funds and things like this. It can actually happen, and there's lots of different ways to do it.
I've actually heard people tell me that their retirement plan is their children, which I feel is unfair. Like, as a parent, I would never want to burden my children with my care.
Like my 9-year-old that says he's going to live in my basement forever, but instead I'll go live in his basement forever.
Right.
I hope he has a rich basement.
I think a little unfair and a little unsecure. That's not very solid. It's interesting to see how people do these things, but retirement is not that complicated once you set about doing it. Once you've got the blueprint and you've done it, and you will have the ability to help with education and so forth.
Well, and I love the idea, back to what Michelle first introduced, and you keep using this term blueprint. The blueprint even comes before the foundation. So anybody who's listening that might be nervous or unsure or thinks, no, this doesn't apply to me, it doesn't hurt to get a blueprint made. If I go to an architect and say, make me a blueprint, I've not yet committed to digging the foundation and
Correct.
Building the house.
Right.
But that's
and
the
it's
first
the least
step.
Expensive part of the entire project.
Yes,
Right.
to have, and yet worth every penny that you pay for that
Right.
blueprint. Because anyone who's had house plans really drawn up knows that it's not just go online and find the picture of the floor plan on Pinterest that you like. There's more to it.
And most often, I don't think that For instance, if somebody comes to your place, does it actually cost them to walk in and say, this is where I'm at?
We give people preliminary blueprints all the time. Before they've committed to become a client and have made that decision, they can see what the blueprint basically looks like before executing any
almost like a
agreement
free
with us.
Consultation before I have to wire my life savings over to you. And let's remind everyone, whether it's for college or retirement missions, you mentioned your kids' missions or your own. My parents served a church humanitarian mission just a couple of years ago, and they were grateful they were in a financial position to do so. But they got to that point by putting a few dollars aside for a lot of years. And I think maybe we can circle back to that principle that today's better to start than tomorrow. If you're 40 or 50, you're not too late. If you're 20, you're not too early. You know, a few dollars from 20 years old turns into so many dollars by mid-60s. But a few dollars really can turn into more dollars. And getting into that habit of, like you said, 10 or 20% that you just don't ever see. I know for me, I have to have it like automatically just taken. Like I have, I even do it for Christmas, completely not an investment, but kind of. I have 7 kids. So Christmas gets expensive, and grandparents and friends and the treats, everything seems to cost more in the month of December. And so I have a savings account that's a sub account to my checking account. And every month dollars leave my checking account and go into my savings account so that when December rolls around, I have a little bit set aside. Now, some of you might be disciplined enough that you can just do that. I am not. If the money's in my checking account, I'm going to spend it probably on food.
I always did that previous years.
But it's kind of that same idea. So instead of just transferring a little bit into the monthly braces payment for my teenager or the monthly Christmas savings, so when December rolls around, I can make sure we can afford it. Now maybe I'm going to find a professional and say, hey, I'm going to give you a small amount of whatever I can eke out to you, and you're going to help me learn how to make that amount grow. And then after I get used to giving you a little bit for a few months, then I'm a little more comfortable. And then I see how that grows, and then I want to give you more because you're helping me make my few dollars into a future of, again, it's not just if you want to be rich and famous or anything like that, but you want opportunities. You mentioned someone who starts earlier in their life when they reach 40s and 50s and surely 60s and 70s, they have more opportunities because finances don't hold them back. I think of my parents serving that church mission that was 100% out of their pocket. Had they not started early with saving money for, decades as both of them worked, that would have been very difficult at their age to come up with that much money while working for free. And so setting some money aside, looking into life insurance, looking into insuring even the non-working parent if there is one in your home. It's not all about billions of dollars. It's about that peace and that stability. Again, speaking of my own situation, when you lose a parent and the world flips upside down, if you bury a child, your world flips upside down. If you're divorced, if you get COVID, there's 100 things where your world flips upside down. If you could maybe have a little bit of financial stability, a little bit of wiggle room where you can weather that storm, it can take you out of that crisis mode.
True story. That's the preparedness concept again.
I love it.
Kind of going back to the blueprint question, this sounds arduous to people. Jennie, you make a really great example. So I have 7 kids, and I was doing all the budgeting, and I was keeping all the appointments and the piano lessons and this and that and all this stuff. How excited were you to go talk to somebody about creating a blueprint for your retirement? Well, it was I can tell you this, it was down the list of priority for you. That wasn't an urgent, nagging, incessant need that you had at that point in time.
No, because I was changing diapers and buying groceries and trying to get the backpacks checked.
But, going down the road that you're going, Ryan, this is why I wanted to have this discussion on this podcast. This is off topic in some ways for our typical broadcast. Mm-hmm. It's so important to me because I see the value in starting early. I'm encouraging my children to start their retirement accounts now, having
and they're young. Your children are young adults.
They're young. They're
adults,
in their
but
20s.
They're still young, right?
But they're young, and they should start now. And beyond that, I see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. None of us want to believe that our partner is going to die, but the actual truth is, every one of us who are partnered will have a spouse that dies on us. Now, we don't know when,
Right.
but it will happen. It absolutely is absolute. It's going to happen. I have seen people in my neighborhoods. Family was driving down Highway 89 about 10 years ago. A tire popped off the wheel of a semi, rolled and hit across the opposite side of traffic, and one of our people in our neighborhood, the father was killed while his wife and children were probably slightly harmed, but unharmed, and left without a father.
Right.
Things happen all the time. People get cancer. In my situation, some people are serving our country and they lose their life, or they don't lose their life. They're injured and they have a catastrophic injury. A child gets sick. There's all kinds of things that if you had started early, you could prepare for, you could manage these events with a lot less stress than when they come and you've not made that preparation.
True story. So to go with a theme here, resilience. Resilience works a lot better with preparedness and forethought, right? So, and here's like, getting back to that concept of the harried family, the stressed out family that are, taking care of kids and working in their careers and taking care of all these priorities that they have, and then thinking, well, we need to sit down and drop everything for a couple of weeks while we create a blueprint and a financial plan and a retirement plan. It isn't on the list of priorities, but it can be done so easily. So you know what I've spent the last 35 years doing? Making that simple, fast, and painless for people. A couple of meetings with me, you'll have a blueprint. A few more meetings with me, you'll have a description, a perfect calendar, and a fully funded plan in place that works in your budget no matter how tight. These things, if you don't make it easy, people won't do it. If it's this, like college course you have to take in order to get this done, people are not going to do it. So we've been very careful to make sure this is fast, easy, and painless to get in place. And once it's in place, all you have to do is put up with your advisor once a year minimum, and put up with your advisor like you do your tax person. You go to your tax person every year. Go to your advisor every year. Make sure the legal side is in place, making sure the proper insurance amounts are in place, and making sure you're properly funding for retirement.
I love it. I love everything you've said. I love that you've pointed out the importance of revisiting this. I use the phrase one and done. This is not a one and done kind of issue. It's not,
no,
yes, you need to have a
great
conversation.
point.
Yes, you need to get started. Yes, a lot of things can be kind of in motion, and really, like you said, once you get that blueprint going and you've got kind of things in place, it's not something you have to babysit all day, every day. But every year you do want to revisit that. In my case, in time, my children will be older, and our financial situation will change. Our medical situation might change. Our tax situation surely will change. And those are things that you can't just fill out in your 20s, 30s, or 40s and then forget about till your deathbed. And that annual checkup, I love keeping in mind, you got to go see your tax guy anyway, or do your taxes. Revisit that once a year, the new year, where are we?
It's awesome, because if you're doing that once a year, then it's a natural place to make the changes during those life-changing events. So if you started young and you're in your 20s, after you graduate college and you get a better job, you're going to say, I'm going to put more money into that retirement, or I'm going to have this product or that product, or whatever I need to do. But then you get married. Then you are going to say, okay, I have some different changes. I've had a life-changing event here. So we need to make some changes. I bought a house. Maybe it's time to put that house into a trust. And there might be reasons to do that. And so, with every life-changing event, you start having children, you have more children. If you're on that, your checkup, you're going to be able to make those changes conveniently. Correct. And easily.
Yes. And beforehand.
You're gonna likely catch those things before some catastrophic thing could happen in your life.
Correct.
To take you off course.
Right.
Agreed.
So, it's preparation, some people call it luck. It's more like prepared, right?
Right.
You don't have to have good luck.
It's very rarely good luck. It's usually hard work, some thoughtful planning, like you called it, the preparedness, but probably not as likely to be luck.
Yeah, and I just have one, and we'll move on, but one real quick thing on ongoing monitoring and maintenance, where it's not what Jennie calls one and done. You can't just do this once and put it in her drawer and expect it to work in 10 or 15 years. It has to be monitored and maintained. An experience here a few years back where a new couple was coming, new clients were coming in to talk to me for the first time, husband and wife, and we just started talking about beneficiaries. Well, who's the beneficiaries? And they had a rather large, it was $1 million plus 401k that he had for years. And we were talking about beneficiaries. And I said, well, who are the beneficiaries? Well, he looks at his wife. He said, well, of course it's my wife here, And the more we talked, and I dug into it, and we logged in and we looked, and wouldn't you know, it was his ex-wife of 20 years earlier that was the primary beneficiary on that 401k.
Yikes.
Now that was yikes. That was a long ride home for that guy that night, I promise.
Can you imagine? And could you imagine had something happen, and if that woman didn't want to do the right thing, legally she would have been entitled to that.
That would be fine. Exactly, that would be the right legal thing. Sure,
it would have been cut and dry. So sometimes people think, well, if I made a mistake, certainly the judge will fix it. No, the judge is going to give it to the ex-wife. That's the precedent. That's the way it works in the law. Mm-hmm. So certainly they became clients. We fixed it, and before anything like that could take place, it was done. So just little things. I mean, I have dozens of stories like that we're not going to bore you with right now, but there are a lot of examples of just little seemingly innocent things that make big ripples and possible big problems for people down the road.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will wrap up with Ryan Craner with Strategic Planning Group and finalize those little things that we need to, these discussions that need to be had. And with that, we'll just be right back. And we're back with Ryan Craner with Strategic Planning Group in Bountiful, and we are excited to be speaking to him today. He's been a professional advisor for the past 30 some odd years, taking care of people's retirements, planning, and you kind of have an interesting format here where you have an in-house kind of, you've got the legal aspect, you've got the financial aspect, and you have the taxes, and where you're all communicating with each other, making sure that your clients are served to their highest good.
That's right. So, here's something that happens in the financial planning, tax planning, legal planning world is you've got attorneys that are creating blueprints and doing great things for their clients with regard to estate planning and legal planning. You've got CPAs and accountant and tax consultants that are doing similar things for their people where they've created a tax strategy and a blueprint. And then you have the financial advisor who has yet another blueprint, and they're all working from separate blueprints. So you can imagine there is overlap and inefficiencies and potential problems where we can see crisis occur there. So at Strategic Planning Group, what we've learned to do is you've got to get all the key advisors at the same table working from the same blueprint. It's really important. And they're all willing. I mean, the attorney's always willing to coordinate. The CPA or the tax person's always willing to coordinate. But for us, it's vital. Otherwise, we really are doing patchwork or piecemeal planning that doesn't work very well. So we have to create that blueprint and make sure that the tax advisor, the legal advisor and attorney, and us as the investment and financial advisor are all working from the same blueprint. That's very awesome. Hard, actually.
So, Ryan, take us through kind of a recap. How do we get these conversations started?
So, I love the examples that Jennie refers to as, hey, I was running around chasing 7 kids and taking care of everything. This wasn't something I was going to do. But make a commitment. If you want to get with your spouse or decide for yourself, I'm going to get in front of somebody. And all I can tell you there is avoid salespeople. Make sure when you're talking about retirement investing and things like that, you're dealing with liquid, low-cost investment plans, and avoid salespeople wherever possible. Those questions that both of you had asked, that you related to the experience of how do you get paid and you didn't like the answer, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There are a lot of good advisors out there that are paid by you, that are affordable and ethical and honest, that you can choose from. It's just a matter of finding them.
So I think the biggest takeaway for today is have the conversation. If you're married or have a partner, have the conversation there. Find a professional. You might have to go through a few professionals to find someone that you really click with or feel like is the right match. But start those conversations. Talk about a will. Talk about life insurance. Talk about long-term planning with your money. And don't put it off, like you said, that procrastination.
Well, I have to say, too, we've got to start having conversations. For me, I'm in my 50s. My parents are 73, 74. I just came back from California, and my dad told us that there was a trust in place. He told us some things, but we didn't have the full picture, and it was a hard conversation for me to have. It wasn't an easy conversation for me to bring up because this was not our family system. This isn't how we operate. This isn't how the way that we do things. But going through the things that I've gone through, I realized that there are some things that needed to be addressed. And so we have started those conversations now. So I think it's important that not only do we talk to getting our personal selves in check, but we need to start having these conversations. Like I said, I'm having them with my children now. We also need to have them with our parents. Yeah. And so we need to start having these conversations that we as Americans, I think, typically kind of feel like they're inappropriate, or they're just not, we just don't do them. Yeah. But we should be doing them, right?
I think Ryan's given us a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. And like Michelle said, it goes the younger generation, the older generation, all of us in the middle. Ryan, thank you for your time. Thank you for letting us come to your place of business to record this in a very safe, socially distanced setup. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today for this episode that's slightly out of the ordinary in terms of we're not listening to one person's tragic story and their resilience, and yet we're learning how our financial situation can help us in these crises of life. Thanks, Ryan, for your guest producer that you've lent to us today, putting the show together while we're out of our normal studio.
Yeah, Tom Craner's done an excellent job for us today. We appreciate it.
Excellent job listening to us chat and chat and chat. And again, to the listeners, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining in. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. Reach out to me or Michelle if you need a little boost, a little kick in the fanny to get it done. You can email us at rrpodcast@ksl.com. And also, if you or someone else you know has a real-life story of facing something difficult, something challenging, one of these crisis situations, and you found some tools of resilience to rise above that, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to let our listeners hear from you. So again, reach out to us at rrpodcast@ksl.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient. And remember, no matter what you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles other people might be dealing with.